Hey everybody, welcome to Money's No Object. I'm your host, Dylan Howell. This is episode number 433 of our YouTube channel and podcast, and I could not be more excited to continue sharing with you guys personal finance topics that I think could be useful for you in your long-term financial journey. Today, we are going to be talking about teaching high school students, teaching just children about money. Right? And specifically some legislation that's been coming up about teaching personal finance in high schools, which I think is absolutely fantastic. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. And then ultimately, I want to tell you what I think you should be teaching your high school student if they are not offered any personal finance education, or if they have personal finance education, what I believe they should be learning. So stick around for a discussion of all that and more in today's episode. Before we get started though, if you could go down below, hit the big red subscribe button, like this video, leave me any feedback in the comments down below, and I'll be sure to respond to anything you leave down there. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify podcasts, be sure to subscribe and leave me a review on either one of those platforms. Follow me on social media at MNO with Dylan. And that's really good supplemental materials to all the things I'm putting out in these long form episodes on YouTube and the podcast every single day. And then if you need somebody to help you to build a financial plan and keep you accountable to that plan over the long term, then I can do that. Just DM me on any of the major social media sites and tell me that you are interested in financial coaching sessions. And you and I can begin working together, pushing towards your long-term financial goals and ultimately pushing you on towards long-term financial freedom, which is what I hope for every single individual who's watching or listening to this show on a day-to-day basis. Now, I know if you are anything like me, and you see this stuff on social media all the time, and I could not agree more, right? If you're like me, you wish that you were taught about personal finance in high school, right? You wish at the minimum, right, by high school, if not far earlier, right, middle school or late elementary school. Teach me about money. Teach me how money really works. Teach me, about investing. Teach me about, saving, and teach me about debt. Teach me about all these different types of things that we never know about until we get to become adults, and then it's thrown on us all too quickly. I think the biggest example of all this is the fact that very few people, once they get to their first year of college or being 18 years old, whatever, very few people have had to manage their own money to that point or had to do so in any significant way. And then very quickly, what happens? They're offered all of this student loan debt. They're offered all of this debt that they don't have marketed to them as debt, but they have marketed to them as this financial aid, right? They make it sound real nice, right? We're going to help you pay for college, yippee, right? Except for we're going to slap a 7% interest rate on it or 6% interest rate on it, and you're going to have to repay it, and it's going to be no fun. All right, they don't tell you about those things. They don't tell you all of the ramifications of taking out student loan debt. And that's just one example. I mean, obviously there's bigger examples like credit cards and how, credit card companies back in the day used to go to college campuses and set up tables, right? And give you a free Frisbee or a free t-shirt or a bag of chips to sign up for a credit card. And it worked, right? And students went into debt because they just didn't know any better, because they were not taught. And so a lot of states are beginning to do stuff about this, right? Some states have already mandated some personal finance education, but an article this past week that really jumped out at me said that Florida just became the largest state to mandate personal finance education in high school, which I think, again, is a fantastic thing. Anytime we can create some type of something tangible for students to take from high school, I'm all here for it, right? Because we all know that there were classes that were mandated on us that probably should not have been, and we're not going to name what those classes are, right? I know, some of you hated math. I happen to be a math lover and find a lot of use out of it, but some of you don't, and that's okay, right? I didn't find a whole lot of use out of history, or I didn't find a whole lot of use out of science, really sciences. Yeah, I don't use those near as much as I thought I would, given that I was required to take a science every single year, it seemed like. So, these things that are mandated for us just did not seem to be super helpful. And everybody always wants the education to be on like taxes, right? Like, why didn't you teach me how to do taxes? Or Why didn't you teach me about investing or whatever? And so it's good to see some states actually standing up and doing this. So Florida, officially the largest state to mandate financial literacy courses in high school. Governor Ron DeSantis signed a bill into law. The legislation was unanimously passed by both the House and the Senate in early March. What the bill is doing with financial literacy is really providing a foundation for students that's going to be applicable in their lives regardless of what path they take, said DeSantis during a press event last week. This will provide a foundation for the students to learn the basics of money management, understanding debt, understanding how to balance a checkbook, which I don't know how much value there is in knowing how to balance a checkbook in 2022, nonetheless. And then understanding the fundamentals of investing. And this new law will apply to students entering ninth grade in 2023-2024. So, yeah, I love this. I think this is fantastic, right? I think any education we can give young people about personal finances is going to be fantastic. Now, the question is, what would I like to see taught? Right? Nobody's asking me. I'm not being put on any committees. But being somebody who, one, obviously I'm in my 20s. I am living life, managing money, investing. I've dealt with debt before, understanding what debt looks like. I'm, finishing a PhD in finance. I understand this whole finance thing, right? And I'm very immersed in it, both when it comes to my personal life and when it comes to my work as well. So nobody's putting me on any committees, but if you need me on one, let me know, right? But this is what I would ultimately suggest, and some things that I would like to see taught to young people. And if this is not taught in your state, to your child, to you, then by all means take heed to some of these things and learn more about them, because these are going to be the things that ultimately get you to where you want to go long-term financially. So I think the first and most fundamental thing that we can teach about personal finance is kind of twofold, right? Again, I don't know if they could teach this in public schools, but this is what I believe, and this is how I would like to see things taught. So I think first and foremost, there's three ways that you can use money, ultimately. You can give it, you can save it, and you can spend it, right? That's all you can do, right? You can either keep the money for yourself by saving it, right? Or investing it. Investing falls into that tub as well. You can spend your money on things that you want or things that you need, right? Or you can give your money away. You can give your money to certain causes. You can be charitable, right? So I think that's first and foremost. We have these different uses of money. But what goes right beside that, I think, in the beginning, the foundation of personal finance is the fact that our money is not ultimately our own. And this comes from more of a Christian perspective, right? This comes from the fact that, I am a Bible-believing Christian. I'm somebody who believes that everything that I'm given is given to me by God. I believe that everything is God's. My money is God's money, right? And God doesn't need my money, right? Doesn't need me to give him money, but my calling on earth is not just to be of my own. It's not just to be myself. It's to be open-handed in the same way that God's been open-handed with me, to be giving, to be charitable, to be generous. So I think those are the two things, right? The uses of money, and then the fact that your money is not your own. And if you can have that as a foundational background of how you understand money, then you will be far better off later on. Because if you know that you can only use money in three ways, then you can allocate your money among those three ways generally, right? And then further, flesh those out into a budget that is going to be useful for you. So that's kind of the next thing that I wanted to talk about, that we have to teach, people in high school, teach young people, teach them how to budget, right? We have to teach people how to budget. We have to teach them the use of a budget, why a budget is valuable, and how a budget is not just setting limits on yourself. It's providing you the freedom to spend your money how you have set aside money to be spent, right? Because ultimately people think of a budget and they think of, okay, I'm limiting how much money I can spend on X, Y, and Z. And that, in my opinion, is a very scarcity mindset when it comes to how you can use your money. Okay. But instead, think of it via they would call it the abundance mindset. And this abundance mindset is, okay, my budget tells me how much I can spend on whatever it may be, or how much money I can put in this particular area of my life. And so very generally, I think that every high school student, everybody who, is, leaving home at age 18 needs to know, just point blank, you need to know how much money is coming in, and you need to know what you're spending money on and how much money you are spending, right? You need to be able to track those expenses. And that's just the beginning. That's just the general beginning of understanding your own money and of understanding your own financial life. Because if you don't know where your money's coming from, then you won't know where it went, right? If you don't know how much money you make, then it's going to be hard to decide how much money to spend in certain places. Or if you don't decide how much money to spend in certain places, it's going to be very, very, very easy to overspend. Very easy to go to the grocery store and spend way more money than you should ever spend at the grocery store. It's going to be very easy to just, go out to eat way more than you ever should. Food is one of the biggest things, right? Food is one of the biggest things that we spend way more money on than we ever expected to spend money on. It's very easy to go shopping many times and spend way more money on clothes than you ever thought that you ultimately would. So I think it is vital that we teach young people how to budget, how to view their money, right? And once they know how to do that, then obviously we have to teach them what's important about allocating your money, right? Well, I talked about the three uses. Obviously, the giving portion, how much could you teach about that, right? You could teach a ton, but I'm not going to focus too much on it today. The saving portion, I think, is very, very vital because not only is saving money an idea that is not widely adopted, right? Everybody wants to talk about saving money, but nobody really does it, or nobody really invests. So there's so much that you could dig into as to why it's important that you have money saved, whether it be for an emergency or for any type of big expense that's coming up, right? You have to have money saved for those types of things. So teaching them how to set money aside, at what point you should be setting money aside, I think that is a very valuable teaching. And then ultimately, as a part of that saving idea, how do you invest your money, right? How do you grow your money for the future? Because I'll tell you this, I don't think, if you just did a poll of, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, and asked them, what's a stock? What's a bond? What's real estate, right? How do you make money in real estate? Where do returns come from in stocks, right? What is a portfolio, right? What's an IRA? What's a 401k? Like things that aren't like super hard when it comes to investing in money management. I think that the answers would be all over the board. I don't think there'd be too many just right on correct answers, because these are not things that you're taught. And not only are they things that you're not taught, yes, we're putting a big responsibility on schools to say, hey, schools, go teach this to these students. But at the same time, I think that there's just been a big miss. And this big miss has been like, parents don't talk about it, right? Parents don't talk about their 401k with their kids. Parents don't talk about saving money with their kids. Parents don't talk about budgeting or whatever with they don't talk about these things with their kids. And then they're shocked when their kids aren't financially well off. And they're shocked when their kids have great jobs, but then ultimately are broke or in debt or file for bankruptcy or whatever later on in life because they don't know how to make good financial choices. They don't know how to manage their own money because they were not even taught at home. So even though we're putting a big responsibility on schools to teach this type of stuff, this should also be done in the home. And I think that really, really helps to make it clear, because think about everything that you've really learned about your character and who you are and what your place is in the world, or what you're good at, or what your opinions are. A lot comes from the way that you were raised. A lot comes from what happened within the home, right? There's so many people who don't want to be anything like their parents, but then grow up and ultimately become a lot like their parents, because that is what you saw. That is what you heard. That is what you grew up around. And I think the same thing goes for managing money, right? If your parents put a big premium on teaching you how to manage your money, showing you things, being very generous themselves, or being good investors themselves, or being good savers themselves, I think that trickles down to the kids that actually paid attention and watched their parents do these types of things. So parents, I put that on you as well. But schools, by all means, I think they should be teaching how to invest your money properly and how to grow your money, because that is going to be one of the most important things that can be done for students over a long period of time. Now, one of the biggest things that I would teach in a personal finance class to high school students is to stay away from debt, right? That would be probably the biggest thing that I taught, and the thing that I spent the most time on, the thing that I just tried to hammer home every single day, is stay away from debt. Because like I said at the outset of the show, the students that are going into student loan debt as soon as they get into college, as soon as they're turning 18, or they're taking out credit cards and then maxing out these credit cards and all these types they are starting their financial life behind, right? Like, it's one thing, like, people going into debt, a little later on. I'm not saying you should. I'm just saying, like, that would be one thing. But to start off your financial life in the negative, because that's ultimately what you're doing. If you are taking out debt to go to school, or you're using a credit card and racking up credit card debt at the beginning of your financial life, when you have no income, you're going to school full time, or very little income, and you're going to school full time, and you have no other assets, you are literally beginning your financial life with a negative net worth, right? You're beginning your financial life with negative money, right? And that's not worth it, right? Digging out of that hole is costly. Digging out of that hole is going to take you a long time in most cases, right? And digging out of that hole is just not worth the education that you may take on. So that would kind of lead me into the idea of paying cash for school, right? Regardless of what school you choose. Teaching high school students that you don't have to go to a 4-year college. Even though all your friends do, you don't have to. You can go to community college and do it, in many cases, free, right? You go to community college free or very, very low cost. Maybe stay at home, go to one close to home, right? You can, work your way through college, right? You can have a full-time job as you work through school. You can do all different types of things. You can apply for every single scholarship under the moon. That'd be something that I spend a lot of time with students on, right? If you want students to stay out of student loan debt, then one of the biggest things that you have to do is point them in the direction of, how do I pay for school without going into student loan debt? So I think spending a lot of time on that would be extremely, extremely valuable for students. And then ultimately, what do I think I would teach high school students? I think I would teach them a plan, right? A plan for your financial life. And I think it would be very, very much like the financial action plan. And, if you guys don't know what that is, I'll go over with you very, very shortly, very briefly here. But I think that if you're going to teach personal finance to students, if you're going to teach young people about finance, giving them actionable steps is valuable, right? Giving even adults actionable steps is valuable, because then they can take those steps and apply them to their own lives and not just be spinning their wheels constantly thinking about different theories and different thoughts and different potentials for their money. Ultimately, teach them these things that way that they can go about doing them properly in their financial life. So I think for a high school student, most high school students are not going to have debt yet, right? So I don't think we need to put a big emphasis on pay off your debt. Ultimately, it's stay out of debt as an overarching rule, right? But I think that high school students should be budgeting or learning how to budget, right? Any type of income that they have, any money that they make, any job that they may have, budget your money, right? So budgeting is going to stay the same. That's going to be the first part. I think when it comes to, again, we're not going to have a paying off debt part. And we're also not going to have a take the match 401k part. So ultimately, the third and fourth part of the financial action plan kind of go away. But if you know what the second and the fifth part are, those both have to do with building up an emergency fund. So I think for a high school student, right? That having an emergency fund may look like some round number of money, right? Should look like something that is something that you can set aside and have there in case you need it. But it's not going to need to be like a certain number of months of household expenses, like I've said in the past, because ultimately that is just a lot of money to set aside. One, that high school students probably don't have the income to set aside. Two, presumably they live in homes where their parents are taking care of them, so they don't have to come up with all those household expenses, and they don't have emergencies that could blow up their lives quite as much as their parents may, right? So ultimately, I think for a high school student, if they can find some round number, let's say between $500 and $1,000 to save and set aside, I think that is valuable, and have that as their like starter emergency fund, right? Or whatever. I think past that, it also gets to a point where, okay, as a high school student, you're probably not going to be able to do this next thing either. And that is investing 15% of your income for retirement. Is what I teach people doing the sixth part of the financial action plan, at least 15% of your income for your future. Now, I think that they should be putting money away, but not in investments and not for retirement or whatever else. I think that they should be putting as much money away if they have a job, right? Or any extra money they get, as much money as they can away for college, right? Or if they're not 16 yet and they want a car when they're 16 and they know that they're going to have to buy the car, then save up money for that car, right? Ultimately, what I want to do in that next part is just say like, hey, let's have a plan. Let's have something that we are shooting towards, and let's start saving up money to purchase that thing, or saving up money to spend on that thing. Because ultimately, what do we save up money, invest money for our future for? We save up money to send our kids to college, right? So maybe some of these kids will have that. Most won't though, okay? So we save up money to spend on our kids' college. We also save up money, invest money for our retirement, to spend in retirement. So ultimately, any money that you're saving up, you're saving to spend sometime in the future, right? Or you're investing to spend sometime in the future. And that's the same thing I want these kids to do here. And the reason I say that they shouldn't invest it is because ultimately, if you don't have at least 3 to 5 years to put money in the market, then you shouldn't. So maybe if you're a freshman in high school and you've got a little job, then maybe you can put a little money away, whatever, in the index fund or something like that. But I mean, junior, senior, you're way too close to college in order to put money at risk in that way, because in any given year, the stock market could do something absolutely crazy, and it's not worth that 1 year risk. Longer term, we're perfectly fine, but in those short-term time horizons, let's just save the money up to pay for those things in cash, right? So I think that's a big thing there. Obviously, the seventh part of the financial action plan is not going to be there either, because we're talking about saving up, because we're talking about putting extra money on your mortgage, putting extra money on the house. Well, the high school student's not going to have a house. But I do think that the ninth part really is valuable and should be done throughout, and that should be giving generously, right? I think if you can start flexing the muscle of generosity early on in your financial life, then you'll be able to benefit from it over a long period of time, both emotionally and financially, right? And both spiritually and financially. So I think that that's a good thing to just go ahead, start doing, have that as a part of your normal rhythms, right? So this is going to look a little different than the general financial action plan, but I think teaching them the financial action plan, right, what I would have adults do about their own money, is also valuable, right? That way they can have some framework for, okay, if I did get into debt later on, what do I need to do? Okay, I have a job that offers a 401k. What do I need to do? Okay, I have income that I need to be saving and investing for retirement. What do I need to do? I have a mortgage. How should I pay that off, right? And the financial action plan answers all of those different questions. So teaching them a plan for their long-term future can be extremely valuable, right? Ultimately, what I'm getting at here is that we need to teach high school students, we need to teach just school-age children in general, we need to teach them foundational things. And we need to teach them things that are going to allow them to get a step up in their financial lives. Now, there's some things I omitted there that I think shouldn't be taught on as much as people think they should, right? I think a lot of personal finance classes put a lot of weight on credit scores, and I think it shouldn't be as big a weight as they put on it, right? Because that's assuming the use of debt is happening consistently, which is not what I would like to teach students, right? It's not what I would like to teach high school kids. I don't want to teach them that the use of debt should be consistent and ongoing throughout your financial life. I also don't want to talk to them about the financing of things. I want you to understand the time value of money, the cost of interest, and being able to not pay interest but earn interest over a long period of time, and how that's valuable, right? I want you to learn about compound interest, but I don't want it to get real bogged down in the fact that we want to make sure we get the lowest interest rate and 0% financing and all this type of stuff. Because again, what I would like to teach high school students is to stay away from debt at every turn, right? So just things that I think are interesting, things that I think should be taught to high school students. And if your child does not have this type of mandate, this type of personal finance education happening within their school, by all means, you should be taking this on within your household. And regardless of if they do or not, you should be having these conversations with, especially your older children, your high school age children, preparing them for the real world, preparing them to become self-sufficient adults financially and otherwise, because there's nothing worse than sending your kid out into the world ignorant to what the world is really like. And so many parents do it, and then their kids end up making the wrong decisions, especially financially. Then you wonder whose fault it is. Well, the parent has to, at some point, take some responsibility and say that this is a part of raising my child. This is a part of teaching my child what they should be doing. As much as somebody may help their child with math homework, you also need to help your child to understand how to manage their money. As much as you may, help your kid get good at football or baseball or whatever, you also need to be spending time talking about personal finances, talking about money, and talking about the role that money plays in our lives. So those are my thoughts. Those are what I think should be taught. Nobody's going to listen to me. That's perfectly fine. But hopefully you parents should be listening. And if you're a high school student, then those are things you need to be looking into and that you need to be trying to learn if you are not being mandated to take some type of personal finance education in your high school curriculum. So hopefully this is helpful to you guys. Hopefully this is something that brings up a lot more conversation later on with different states deciding to make this a mandate in their curriculums. And ultimately, what do I want? I want people to be financially literate. I want people to be financially free, and the only way that's going to happen is if we learn. And ultimately, I don't want people to have to learn forever from YouTube videos and podcasts. I would love for people to actually learn in the places they try to learn everything else, which is within schools themselves. So thanks for watching this video. If you could, go down below, hit the big red subscribe button, like this video, leave me any feedback in the comments down below, and I'll be sure to respond to anything you leave down there. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify podcasts, be sure to subscribe and leave me a review on either one of those platforms. Follow me on social media at MNO with Dylan. And that's really good supplemental materials to all the things I'm putting out in these long form episodes on YouTube and the podcast every single day. Then if you need somebody to help you to build a financial plan and keep you accountable to that plan over the long term, then I can do that. Just DM me on any of the major social media sites and tell me that you are interested in financial coaching sessions, and you and I can begin working together, pushing towards your long-term financial goals, and ultimately pushing you on towards long-term financial freedom, which is what I hope for every single individual who's watching or listening to this show on a day-to-day basis. So tune in tomorrow as I continue talking about personal finance topics that I think can be useful for you in your long-term financial journey. So thanks for tuning into this episode of Money's No Object. I'm your host, Dylan Howell. God bless.